In the year 3124, humanity had spread across the stars, settling on countless planets and establishing colonies in distant corners of the galaxy. Yet despite their expansion, peace was a rare and fragile thing. The Illith Empire, an insect-like species with enormous power, had risen to dominate much of the known galaxy. Their fleets roamed through space with terrifying efficiency, crushing any who dared to challenge their rule. The galaxy, once teeming with the hopes of new civilizations, now trembled under their oppressive shadow. Earth, far from being a center of galactic power, had become a forgotten relic. The once proud home of humanity, lost in the vast expanse of the universe, was seen as insignificant by most of the galaxy's powerful factions. The Illith, with their advanced technology and ruthless tactics, paid little attention to the small blue planet. It was just another unimportant world, they thought, ripe for the taking when the time came. But on a quiet, almost unremarkable moon called Tranquilon 9, something unexpected happened. The Illith launched a surprise attack on a distant human colony there. Their ships descended from the stars like a storm, confident in their ability to overwhelm whatever stood in their path. The colony's defenses were weak, and there was no reason to believe they could resist the might of the Illith Empire. However, the Illith had underestimated something crucial. As their ships hovered above the moon, preparing to launch a devastating strike, a single shot rang out from an unexpected source. It was a weapon unlike anything they had encountered before, silent, invisible, and yet powerful beyond measure. The shot tore through the heart of one of their largest warships, not with the flashy explosions of plasma or energy blasts, but with a simple, brutal force. No warning, no time for defense. In an instant, the Illith ship was split apart, reduced to debris floating in the cold vacuum of space. For a moment, there was confusion among the Illith fleet. They had never seen anything like it. Their sensors failed to register the weapon. Their defenses couldn't block it, and their tactics couldn't predict it. They had come prepared for advanced energy-based warfare, but instead, they faced a new and terrifying force. The Illith didn't know it yet, but this was the beginning of a revolution in warfare, one that would change the balance of power in the galaxy forever. The weapon, which would soon be known as the Railgun, was not something of glittering energy or mystical technology. It was simple, a basic principle of physics, using magnets to launch a metal slug at incredible speeds. But its simplicity was precisely what made it so deadly. The Illith couldn't comprehend that a race as seemingly insignificant as humanity could possess such an unexpected and potent weapon. And so, the legend of the Railgun began, spreading quickly throughout the galaxy, though none could have guessed just how much it would shift the power dynamic among the stars. Humanity, it seemed, had one weapon left to play, and it was more than enough. The Railgun quickly became the weapon that stunned the galaxy. Unlike the flashy, energy-based weapons that most advanced civilizations relied on, the Railgun was simple, quiet, and deadly. It didn't fire beams of light or crackling bolts of plasma. It fired a solid metal slug at incredible speeds, powered by electromagnetic forces that harnessed the power of magnets. No matter how advanced their technology, no energy shield was capable of withstanding the sheer kinetic force of a railgun round. The weapon didn't rely on exotic materials or rare energy sources. It used basic elements found in abundance, making it not only effective but also inexpensive to produce. The Illith, so accustomed to seeing planets burn under the glow of their powerful energy weapons, couldn't comprehend the devastating potential of a weapon that didn't rely on flash or spectacle. The first time they encountered it, they thought it was a fluke, a one-time anomaly that could be easily dismissed. However, as more and more ships and stations fell to railgun fire, they realized their mistake. What made the railgun particularly terrifying was its silence. Unlike the loud booms of plasma shots or the crackle of laser beams, a railgun shot didn't make a sound until it hit its target. By the time an enemy ship realized what was happening, it was already too late. This element of surprise proved to be an invaluable advantage. Even the most advanced enemy ships, designed to counter energy-based weapons, had no way of anticipating the sudden violent impact of a railgun slug. The Illith, in particular, found themselves helpless against it. Their fleets, once seen as invincible, were being destroyed without warning, without any signs of the impending attack. The railgun didn't need a long recharge time like plasma weapons, nor did it require a complex targeting system. A single shot could tear through the hull of a ship, obliterating everything in its path with brutal efficiency. It wasn't just a weapon of war, it was a weapon of precision. As the railgun's influence spread, humanity began to realize the strategic advantage it held. While other civilizations spent countless resources on high-tech weapons, the railgun was a marvel of simplicity. Earth's military commanders, once focused on outdated and expensive tactics, now turned to this new form of warfare. Entire fleets of human ships began to integrate railguns, from small fighter crafts to the massive capital ships. No longer did they need to rely on expensive, energy-draining technology to fight. A single railgun, mounted on the right ship, could level an entire fleet. The Illith, unable to counter this new threat, found themselves scrambling to adapt. They tried to upgrade their energy shields, to increase the strength of their hulls, but nothing worked. The power of the railgun lay not in its complexity, but in its simplicity, its raw, untamed force. Every attempt to defend against it failed, and the Illith slowly began to lose their dominance over the galaxy. What they had once thought of as a minor race, Earth, had turned the tables with a single, unexpected weapon. The galaxy watched in awe as the tide of war began to shift, all because humanity had uncovered the power of the railgun. Captain Alara Voss stood in the quiet command center of the Dustwalker, a ship that looked far less impressive than the massive Illith warships it faced. The crew aboard her vessel was a mix of seasoned veterans and eager recruits, all gathered around a table where the mission plan was laid out. It was a simple objective: destroy the Illith command ship. But the weight of that mission carried the potential to shift the balance of power in the war. The Illith were growing desperate, their tactics increasingly erratic as their fleets were torn apart by the silent power of the railguns. But their pride remained unshaken, and they believed that no one could challenge the might of their flagship, the Apex Venom. The command ship was a symbol of their power, a floating fortress. Its size alone struck fear into those who faced it. But Alara and her crew were undaunted. They knew what they were capable of. The railgun mounted on the Dustwalker wasn't the largest in the fleet, but it was one of the most precise. Hidden inside the ship's battered hull, it had been honed to perfection over countless drills. No flashy displays of power, no grand gestures. Just the quiet hum of the railgun charging up, ready to fire. Alara's hand hovered over the command console, her eyes fixed on the radar screen. The Apex Venom appeared, a massive silhouette cutting through the stars. The Illith flagship was flanked by two smaller ships, their weapons primed and shields raised. It seemed impossible that a small vessel like the Dustwalker could stand a chance against such a formidable force. But Ilara's experience and tactical brilliance had led her to believe otherwise. The key was not to overpower the enemy with numbers, but to strike fast and decisively. She glanced at her crew, who were all silent, their faces a mixture of nerves and determination. The mission had one shot. If they missed, they would be torn apart. If they succeeded, the tide of the war would shift. The railgun powered up, its electromagnetic field crackling faintly. "Lock onto the Apex Venom's weak spot," Alara ordered. Her voice was calm, though inside her heart raced. The ship was moving at breakneck speed, weaving in and out of the enemy's targeting range. The crew held their breath as the target narrowed to a pinpoint. The railgun fired. Time seemed to slow as the solid metal slug shot forward, faster than the eye could follow. The instant it hit the side of the apex venom, there was no explosion, no bright flash. Instead, the massive ship's hull buckled inwards, a single clean cut right through the reinforced armor. The Illith flagship's shields flickered, failing in an instant as the energy dissipated into the void. The apex venom shuddered, its systems failing. Within moments, it was dead in space, the once proud warship now nothing more than a drifting husk. The remaining Illith ships, disoriented by the loss of their flagship, were easy targets for the rest of the Dustwalker's crew. The battle was over before it had truly begun. As Alara watched the wreckage of the Illith flagship spin slowly, in space, she realized the significance of their victory. They hadn't just destroyed a ship, they had sent a message across the galaxy. Humanity was no longer to be ignored. With just one shot, they had proven that a small, underestimated force could change the course of history. In the wake of the destruction of the apex venom, the galaxy began to stir. News of the unexpected victory spread faster than anyone could have imagined. The Illith, once untouchable, now found themselves vulnerable. Their massive fleets, once thought to be unbeatable, were being decimated by railguns, simple weapons that bypassed their advanced energy shields with terrifying ease. The Illith were quick to regroup, but they could not stop the growing wave of resistance that had taken root on Earth. Humanity had begun to unite under the banner of this new weapon. The railgun had become more than just a tool of war. It had become a symbol of hope and defiance. Colonies that had once been mere outposts in the vastness of space now saw themselves as part of something larger, something capable of challenging the most powerful empire in the galaxy. Earth's military had begun mass-producing railguns, outfitting their fleets with this simple but devastating weapon. The Illith, for all their strength, were no longer the undisputed rulers of the galaxy. On the front lines, Captain Alara Voss and her crew stood as symbols of the revolution. They were not the only ones using railguns now, but their success had inspired countless others. Every day, more ships joined the fight, each one carrying a railgun, each one determined to strike back at the invaders who had once thought themselves invincible. The Illith retaliated fiercely, launching counterattacks with even greater intensity. They tried to develop new technologies to counter the railguns, new energy shields, new weaponry, but nothing could match the raw power of a railgun. The very simplicity of the weapon made it difficult to counter. While the Illith struggled to adapt, the human forces grew more proficient, more strategic in their use of the railguns. Alara knew that the war was far from over, but each victory, each successful strike, sent a clear message to the Illith. Humanity would not be subdued. But it wasn't just the Illith who were watching. Other alien factions, once wary of humanity's expansion, now saw the humans as a growing threat. Some viewed the rise of the railgun as an opportunity, eager to join the fray and form alliances with the humans to weaken the Illith even further. Others, however, viewed it as a warning. If a race as young as humanity could wield such power, what would happen when they were no longer satisfied with fighting one empire? The question of what came next began to echo throughout the galaxy. Would humanity's rise bring about a new era of peace, or would it lead to further conflict, as other species either sought to ally with or conquer the humans? The Illith, struggling to hold on to their once immense empire, were not the only threat humanity would face. But for now, the railgun had become humanity's secret weapon, a symbol of both their ingenuity and their defiance. The galaxy had been changed, and no one could predict where this new chapter in history would lead. Alara, standing on the bridge of the Dustwalker, gazed out at the stars, knowing one thing for certain. Humanity was no longer a forgotten species. They had become a force to be reckoned with, and nothing could stop them from reaching for the stars. As the war against the Illith Empire raged on, humanity's understanding of the railgun evolved, and so did their tactics. What had started as a simple defense mechanism had transformed into a weapon capable of striking at the very heart of the Illith's power. The Railgun, once mounted on a few select ships, now became the backbone of humanity's military forces. Across the galaxy, massive fleets of warships armed with these weapons began to converge, launching coordinated attacks on Illith-controlled planets and space stations. The Illith, once masters of the stars, now found themselves on the defensive, unable to predict where the next attack would come from. They had underestimated humanity's capacity to adapt and innovate. Their once mighty warships, capable of laying waste to entire planets, were now nothing more than targets. Each new battle brought further evidence of the Illith's diminishing strength, and with every victory, humanity's resolve hardened. Among the leaders of this revolution was Captain Alara Voss, whose reputation as a brilliant tactician grew with every campaign she led. She was no longer just the captain of the Dustwalker. She had become a symbol of humanity's rise, a living testament to what could be achieved through unity and ingenuity. Her crew, once a small group of fighters, had grown into a well-trained, battle-hardened force. They had become experts in the art of using railguns, knowing how to target weak points in enemy ships with pinpoint accuracy. As more and more humans took up the cause, Alara found herself coordinating not just the efforts of the Dustwalker's crew, but entire fleets. She knew the war was far from over, but every success, every Illith ship destroyed, brought them one step closer to victory. The Illith, reeling from defeat after defeat, began to change their tactics. Instead of relying solely on their massive fleets, they turned to more insidious methods. They launched covert strikes against human colonies, targeting civilian populations to break the spirit of resistance. Their hope was that by striking fear into humanity, they could force a surrender. But the Illith underestimated the resolve of humanity. The railgun had not just given them a weapon, it had given them hope. With each attack, each brutal strike, humanity's resolve grew stronger. They would not bow to the Illith, no matter the cost. In one particularly brutal battle, a Illith strike force attempted to take control of a key human colony on the planet Viala 4. Their forces were overwhelming, but humanity had learned to fight back with precision. The colony's defenses, once seen as weak, now proved capable of holding the line. Railguns fired from human ships and stations, tearing through the Illith forces with deadly accuracy. Alara and her fleet led the charge, their ships weaving in and out of the battle, striking with speed and power. The Illith, accustomed to overwhelming their enemies with sheer force, found themselves outmatched by the precision and simplicity of the railguns. The battle for Vela 4 was a turning point. The Illith could no longer ignore the growing power of humanity. They had been pushed back once again, and now the question was no longer whether humanity could win, it was how much longer the Illith could survive. The tide had turned, and there was no going back. The railgun had proven to be more than just a weapon. It had become the key to humanity's future, and nothing could stand in their way. The war against the Illith had reached a critical point, and humanity's victory seemed inevitable, yet the final chapter had yet to unfold. Despite the devastating effectiveness of the railgun, the Illith were not ready to surrender. In their desperation, they pulled their final card, an experimental superweapon, one unlike anything humanity had faced before. The weapon, known as the Dreadfire, was a colossal device capable of firing a massive energy burst, powerful enough to obliterate entire fleets in a single shot. It was humanity's greatest challenge, and Alara Voss knew that if they didn't stop it, the war would be lost. The Illith had deployed the Dreadfire at the heart of their last stronghold, a heavily fortified space station known as the Crucible. The station was protected by layers of impenetrable shields, and its location in the middle of a dense asteroid field made it nearly impossible to reach. Alara and her fleet, however, had no choice but to engage. As the command center of the Dustwalker hummed with activity, Alara stared at the star map, calculating their approach. Every move had to be precise. This was not a battle they could afford to lose. The railgun, their most effective weapon, could not penetrate the Dreadfire's shield. A direct assault would result in total destruction. However, they had a plan. One that would require every ounce of strategy and risk. Humanity's strength lay in their adaptability, and they would not falter now. The first phase of the operation was deceptively simple. Alara ordered her fleet to approach the Crucible from the asteroid belt, staying hidden from the Illith's radar systems. The idea was to create a distraction, to draw the attention of the Illith forces and keep them from realizing their true intentions. For hours, the fleet maneuvered silently through the debris, staying just out of range of the enemy's sensors. The tension in the command center was palpable. Every crew member knew the stakes. If they were discovered, it would mean the end. As they closed in on the station, Alara gave the signal. The fleet fired a series of calculated railgun strikes, targeting the outer defenses of the Crucible. The Illith forces reacted quickly, sending their own ships to intercept. The diversion had worked. While the Illith were distracted by the attack, Alara ordered her best pilots to launch a small, specialized strike team, the Dustwalker included, straight toward the heart of the Crucible. With railguns primed, they penetrated the station's outer layers, bypassing energy shields with brutal precision. Once inside, the team moved quickly, bypassing security systems and targeting the core of the Dreadfire. The station's defenses were formidable, but no amount of shielding could stop the focused fire of a railgun. As Alara led her team deeper into the heart of the Crucible, the Illith realized too late what was happening. In a final act of desperation, they activated the Dreadfire, preparing to fire on the fleet. Just as the weapon powered up, Alara and her team delivered the decisive blow. A single railgun shot that struck the Dreadfire's core, causing a violent chain reaction. The explosion that followed was unlike anything humanity had seen before. The Crucible and the Dreadfire were reduced to cosmic dust, scattering across the galaxy. The Illith were left without their ultimate weapon, their hope shattered in an instant. The last remnants of their empire crumbled. Humanity had done it. Against all odds, they had secured their future. The railgun had not only been the weapon that turned the tide of war, it had now delivered the final victory. The galaxy would remember this day, not as the day the Illith fell, but as the day humanity proved that even the mightiest of enemies could be brought to their knees by the simplest of weapons. The aftermath of the battle against the Illith was nothing short of revolutionary. The galaxy, once teetering on the edge of uncertainty, now stood at the dawn of a new era. Humanity, having emerged victorious against the most powerful empire the galaxy had ever known, was no longer just a fledgling species struggling for survival. They had become the dominant force in the universe, their power symbolized by the railgun, the weapon that had changed the course of history. In the days following the destruction of the Dreadfire and the fall of the Illith, peace began to settle over the galaxy, but it was a peace shaped by humanity's newfound strength. The railgun, which had started as an unexpected weapon of defense, had become the cornerstone of their military might. Across countless worlds and space stations, humanity's presence was felt, not with fear, but with respect. Alara Voss, once just a captain, was now regarded as one of the most influential leaders in the galaxy. She had overseen humanity's rise from the brink of extinction to its position as a galactic power. Despite her newfound fame, Alara remained focused on the bigger picture. What came next for humanity? While the Illith were no longer a threat, the galaxy was still a vast and unpredictable place. Other alien civilizations, some curious, others cautious, now turned their eyes toward humanity. Alliances began to form, and diplomats from across the galaxy arrived on Earth, eager to understand how such a young species had been able to bring down an empire. Many were wary, unsure whether humanity's rise would lead to peace or to further conquest. The leaders of Earth, though, made it clear. Humanity sought peace, but they would never again be subjugated. Ilara, along with the other leaders, worked tirelessly to establish new treaties, ensuring that the galaxy's future would not be one of endless war. But the shadow of the Illith's dominance still lingered in the minds of many, and the question of whether humanity would maintain its position as the galaxy's supreme power was still unanswered. The Railgun had proven that with the right tools, humanity could stand toe-to-toe with even the most advanced civilizations. Yet, there were still those who believed that weapons alone would not guarantee lasting peace. As humanity continued to forge its place in the galaxy, the Railgun became not just a weapon, but a reminder of what had been accomplished and what could still be achieved. Ilara, standing on the bridge of the Dustwalker as it cruised through the stars, reflected on the journey that had brought them here. She had seen humanity fight against impossible odds, had watched them grow stronger with each battle. Now, she saw a galaxy that was no longer defined by its conquerors, but by the choices its inhabitants made. The Railgun had been their secret weapon, but it was their unity, their resilience, and their resolve that would shape the future. The Illith were gone, but the galaxy had changed forever, and humanity's place among the stars was secure. The question now was not whether humanity would survive, but how they would thrive in the galaxy they had helped to reshape.